Come on in, we're just about to get started. I just turned on my mic, so it's certainly official right now.
Great.
And this setup is delightful. We're gonna get super creative with this because we got 2 rows going down the side. You're free to sit up front here. We are gonna move around a little bit in this workshop. This is scheduled for about 2 hours, but I don't see it going 2 hours, but it will go over an hour. So if you're trying to make the next session 1 and 11, you'll be good to go for that. And if you need to sneak out at any time, feel free to do so as well. All right, so this is pretty straightforward. You are in the right place if you're like, hey, I want to learn how to have some curious conversations. I want to work on my conversational skills, or I'm just a curious person and I didn't know where to go at 9:30 in the morning. So either way, you're in the right spot. I will applaud you for the 9:30 show up. I cannot tell you how many 9:30s I've skipped at conferences. So I'm really stoked to have you guys here right now. My name is Nicole Merrill. I'm the founder of Future Skills, and I specialize in emerging careers and skill sets, specifically training technical teams on soft skills. And I like to talk about how to have better conversations. I'm on a mission to help people have better conversations, more engaging conversations, because I find people and conversation pretty darn interesting. And we're going to get started. I'm going to take you kind of on a wild ride of breaking down what I mean by curious conversations, curiosity. Also, what does that even look like, right? Like, how do conversations work? How can you engage people? And then we're going to talk about some strategies as you're at the conference to really engage people and meet the people that you want to meet on your terms without having to deal with like kind of the hustle. And then we're going to talk about how curious conversations really impact your work and how you can create better products and also collaborate better by using conversations in the workplace. So, wild ride, we're going to do that in about an hour and a half. And we got a good group for that. But first, I want to do a little exercise here. Everyone knows we start things off to get a little bit awkward. I specialize in teaching awkward, which I'll explain in a little bit. But what I would like you to do right now, if you can see me, I don't know, I'm kind of backlit here. I'm going to ask you to talk to the person next to you. I'm going to give you an exercise. So partner up. Do me a favor, and if you feel that drop in your stomach right now that's like, oh shit, she's gonna have me do something, don't worry, this is gonna be less than 5 minutes, and I promise it's not that bad, okay? Because I know. So find a partner, and you can do groups of 2 or 3, up to you guys, and then I'm gonna wait for that one. I'll tell you what to do after you find a partner. So just introduce yourself to the person next to you, say hello. Yes. And I'm gonna give you each a piece of paper, and while you're getting acquainted with each other, do you want to join a group over here? No, you're just you'll observe. Still a good conversational skill as well. And here's what you're gonna have you do. I'm gonna give you this, and I'm gonna give you this. And hopefully you all have met each other now, you've exchanged all your life stories, you know, the usual. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna have you do. Does anyone need a pen? Because we're gonna be drawing.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, you need a pen. Anyone else? You need a pen? Excellent. Only one person's going to be drawing. Do you have it? Okay, so we've got player 1, player 2, just to divide you up. Player 1, you are, raise your hand if you're going to be player 1. Someone has to be? Yeah? Okay. I don't want you to think too hard about this. Hey, welcome guys. Have a seat. We're doing an exercise. Yeah. Go ahead and, I'm going to give you this. You came just in time. I'm going to give you this.
Thank you so much.
And you can join any group. Okay. Everyone's like, what are we doing here? Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start off with a little exercise where player 1, your job is going to be imagine a dog. Any dog. Could be your dog, could be a dog that you want, could be a big dog, a 3-legged dog, a red dog, I don't care what it is, just imagine a dog. What you're gonna do is you're going to describe this dog to your partner. And player 2, your job is to draw the dog. Okay? Yeah. Right? Do not think too hard about this. This is not an art show. We are not going to be displaying this. But again, just to repeat, hi, you just walked in. Congrats. Welcome. Partner it up. So, quickly, you just, that's your partner right there. You can do something. Congratulations. So, to recap, this is pretty straightforward. Player 1, you are going to describe a dog, any dog you'd like, and player 2, you're going to draw the dog described. And we're not going to think too hard about this at all. Okay? And I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to complete this task, and then we're going to find out what the hell we're doing this task for to begin with. Okay? Okay. Ready? Describe your dogs and draw.
All right. Am I describing it? Okay, good.
Okay, guys, fabulous. This is great. We're all done now, so we can wrap up the conversations around our dogs. How did that feel? Yeah, okay, good. So a couple of reasons we did that. First off, did anyone want to show their dog right now? How's it look?
Sure,
yeah?
Sure.
What do we got here?
Yeah,
Did you describe it to us?
Yeah, he's kind of a pissed off dog. He kind of turned into a punk rock dog. Like, cause he's got sort of like mohawk spikes coming out of him.
Okay.
He's got a love tattoo, but it's like a broken heart.
So this is great. So we've got a broken heart tattoo, kind of a love tattoo. I kept hearing pissed off dog over here. We've got a spiky collar. Okay, I like that. All right, so here's why we did that. First off, I like to get things started, but we do something totally different from what we're used to doing. I'm gonna, how many of you, are there any artists that draw regularly in the room? Yeah, nice, okay, good. That's good, the majority of people don't. And so what happens a lot of times when you tell people to draw, they go, I can't do that, right? Because they haven't practiced. And so I like people getting out of their comfort zone and doing things that maybe they're not as comfortable with. The other reason we do this is openness, because a lot of times when we come into conversations and stuff like that, they're not scripted, right? And you have to remain open to it. And what you just did is talk to another person, listen to them, you use active listening skills, you asked follow-up questions, maybe you exchanged some ideas. Did anyone build on what the other person was saying? Yeah? Yeah? What else did you add to it?
Well, our dog is civically engaged, so he is telling everyone to go vote.
Oh, nice. Okay, civically engaged dog that tells everyone to go vote. Good. So conversation, once you're getting comfortable with someone, you're adding on to that, right? You're finding commonality. Did anyone find anything in common with the person they were talking to that they didn't know? Yeah? Yeah?
We don't have dogs.
You don't have dogs. You both don't have dogs. That's great. That's cool. That's a commonality, right? And a pretty normal question to ask if you're talking about dogs. All right, cool. So we got that out of the way. That's just kind of an idea of some of the skills we're going to be talking about today. That openness towards the unknown, that getting comfortable with ambiguity. I didn't give you much direction. I didn't tell you exactly what we're going to be doing this for, right? You were kind of just had to jump into it. And that's a lot what it's like in terms of approaching conversations. Just to give you an idea, this is my background. I introduced myself before. I'm the founder of Future Skills, a consulting firm that specializes in emerging careers and skill sets and the new world of work. A lot of times people say future of work, but like honestly, we're already living it, right? I think you guys are pretty much proof of that, some of the work that you work on. I am a speaker, I'm an author, I have a book coming out in the fall, and on the side, I'm also a conversation designer for chatbots. So I kind of live in this hybrid world, and I'm pretty obsessed with technology as it relates to machine learning and voice tech. So I like to give people, if you see me at the conference this week, here's things you can talk to me about. These are my interests. So I'm going to make it easy for you. I wish all speakers did this because speakers are approachable people. You can talk to them. And a lot of times, I know I do talks because I like when people come talk to me afterward. It makes it easier. If you guys are ever thinking of pitching a conference and speaking at a conference, one of the biggest benefits is people come to you, so you don't have to do the hard work of going out to talking to people. So, fun fact. So these are my things that I love, languages, card games, things like that. Come talk to me about it. I like to tell people that what I actually do is I teach people how to navigate professional awkwardness. So I specialize in the soft skills, the things like relationship building, conversational skills, networking, salary negotiation, things like that all revolve around the people skills. And so when I tell people that, I say, I teach networking. And they all go, oh my God, I hate networking so much. And I say, yeah, I understand. I feel the same way too. Which is kind of a surprise, like why am I up here teaching these skills when I feel that way, right? And that's because what we've really been taught about networking is it's been transformed from this thing where, talking to people and having interesting conversation about things that interest you has been transformed into kind of this hustle. You gotta meet the right person at the right time, make sure you give them their business card, make the right contact, and there's all this pressure. And that's terrible. It feels like you're a used car salesman going out there and just giving out business cards, right? I know there's people that when they hear networking, right, they're like, oh, great, I'm leaving, right? And that's because it's kind of been, forced on us. We all get together, we don't really know we don't have like a common task, such as drawing dogs, right? To gather around, so it makes, when we walk into a room and we think, oh God, what am I supposed to do now? Right? And there's a lot of pressure. And truth, I blame baby boomers for it, but only because all the millennials get blamed for everything. Real estate. What is it we've been blamed for recently? So we've killed real estate, we've killed driving, we've killed relationships and dating. At the same time, baby boomers kind of have really drilled in our head, we have to meet the right person at the right time in order to get a job or to do this. And what happens is we've lost all of the other stuff that you get out of connecting with people. We've lost the value of conversation. And I say this almost with an asterisk because baby boomers didn't kill it. In fact, baby boomers are the ones that still retain a lot of that value of having conversations in person and face to face. So some of those generational differences there. Networking is often framed in a extroverts versus introverts. And I want to tell you, I want to break that down a little bit because I am an extreme extrovert. I gotta out myself, right? Obviously it's easy for me to stand up here and talk about having conversations, but extroverts and introverts aren't, that binary doesn't always work because extroverts, the definition of an extrovert is a person who takes energy from people. That's fired up. The more people I talk to, the more people I'm around, the more people with attention on me, I get fired up, right? And introverts, they would prefer to keep their thoughts to themselves and not, they're kind of shy at times. And maybe don't want to be the center of attention, right? That has nothing to do with your conversational skills. Conversational skills are separate from that. And I'll tell you, you'll know this when you ever been in, kind of in a group event and an extrovert is just talking at you and you're like, I can't get a word in, what do you even know I'm here, right? It's not because the extrovert's just good at conversation. That's not good at conversation if you don't let someone talk. What I'm doing right now, I'm talking at you. Granted, I'll ask you for questions, but we're not having a conversation right now. And so I want to get out of this kind of mindset of extroverts versus introverts. We'll come back to this a little bit later when we talk about strategies for networking breaks and stuff like that. But keep that in mind because this has, what we're talking about today is conversational ability and skills. And honestly, I found, I used to be a professional career coach, and I found a lot of the introverts that I worked with, I learned so much from them about the skill of active listening. What's funny about that is when I first started coaching, I was like, cool, I got this. I'm just going to tell people what to do. Like, no. You gotta like listen. Like actually take in what they're saying, mirror it back to them, and then wait. Don't try to just problem solve. And that's a very different approach than someone who comes in and is like, I got the solution for you. Okay? So extroverts and introverts, different people, but it's not about that. It's about the ability to have ability to have conversations. So I'm a language person. I like breaking things down and not making assumptions. So I want to talk about curiosity. Curious. I pulled this quote, this is actually in my book because I love this quote so much. Curiosity is an everlasting flame that burns in everyone's mind. It makes me get out of bed in the morning and wonder what surprises life will throw at me that day. Curiosity is such a powerful force. Without it, we wouldn't be who we are today. Curiosity is the passion that drives us through our everyday lives. We have become explorers and scientists with our need to ask questions and to wonder. And by the way, this is a map of Mars in the background. And the reason I chose that is because it was written by Clara Marr, the 12-year-old who won the contest to name the Mars rover. And that's how the Mars rover got named Curiosity. And I thought that was super interesting, right? Like here we're sending this, mission out to Mars to explore because we're curious what the hell is going on Mars. And this 12-year-old named it. I don't know about you guys, but at 12, like I did nothing of the sort, right? Like I was barely getting my homework done. And so what I love about this is this part here, we become explorers and scientists with our need to ask questions and to wonder. And I point that out because so much in the workplace is the opposite of this, right? We get the daily grind of our work kind of grinds out our curiosity. If you're lucky enough to be in a job where you have a boss and an organization that helps you explore, that encourages curious questions, then you're in a spot where you're allowed to do this. But for the majority of people, you're not allowed to come to work and question everything or employ your curiosity. And curiosity is now becoming one of those skills that they're starting to seek out in leadership. Harvard Business Review just released a bunch of research around this about cross-silo leadership, and that's the ability to lead across disciplines and cross functions. And the way that organizations work now, they're usually, one function here, this department works here, and they don't really work together. And so we're seeing an evolution now of interdisciplinary thinking, interdisciplinary leadership, and it's really anchored in the idea of curiosity. When our curiosity is triggered, we think more deeply and rationally about decisions and come up with more creative solutions. In addition, curiosity allows leaders to gain more respect from their followers and inspire employees to develop more trusting and more collaborative relationships with colleagues. And This was from Why Curiosity Matters. And what I love about this is because sometimes when you're working, you know, I work a lot with engineers and stuff like that, and when we start talking about things like curiosity and soft skills and stuff like that, you know, it can be a tendency to think, well, those are just kind of some emotional things here. But what we're really talking about is problem solving, thinking through all the possibilities, not just making assumptions. And that's why curiosity is so powerful.
For software developers. Hello everyone.
Oh, hi. So I want you to think about right now, if you think about in your own conference, as we approach this week, what are you curious about? What type of people do you want to meet? What do you want to learn? What do you want people to know about you? And that last one's kind of nice, right? We think a lot about, well, who am I going to meet? Who are these people and stuff like that? Maybe you don't, but I do. Well, if I ask you, what would you like people to know about you? What would you say? You don't have to answer me right this second. Okay. So if you think about this conference and kind of what you're going to do over the next couple of days, what are you curious about? Does anyone want to share? What you might want to learn? No? All right, I'll leave it for later. Yeah? Oh, sorry, I was looking at it. Tell me.
No, anything specific to this particular talk is looking at data, just being curious about the data, trying to figure out how to ask questions.
How to ask questions, yeah, okay, great. Excellent. Anyone else want to share what they're curious about this week? Yeah.
So today I came here to like know how to talk to people, or maybe to be curious about their lives.
Yes.
That's what I expect from the conference as well.
Perfect. So coming here to learn about people, to be curious about their lives, and what you expect from their conference as well. Excellent. This type of framework, being able to reflect before you go into either a gathering or a conference like this, is really powerful. Because a lot of times we just jump right in and we're just like flying by, and we haven't given ourselves time to really think through, like, so what do I want out of this, right? So let's talk about conversations. Let's go first. Human relationships are rich and they're messy and they're demanding, and we clean them up with technology. We sacrifice conversation for mere connection. I jumped ahead, but I wanted to read that anyway. Here's the deal. Right now we talk a lot about difficulties around conversations, and I want to say that it's not just you guys, right? In fact, it's not just introverts, it's everybody right now. And that's in part because the way that we communicate has changed so dramatically over the last 10 years. Most of us spend our time in digital environments, right? We email, we text, we Slack. And what happens is we lose the ability to have open-ended conversations. And this author that I quoted here, she's actually a professor at MIT. She wrote a book, she wrote a couple of different books, Alone Together, but then a follow-up called Reclaiming Conversation, in which she used ethnographic studies and observations and surveys to understand how technology is shaping our conversations. And she did this with 3 different groups. She did this with students, she did this with families, and she did this in the workplace. And in this book, she talks a lot about how people are challenged with the idea of having conversations face-to-face because we're so used to it. And I know this is stuff that we kind of already know, but it's important to put this out there. This isn't shaming for, using our phone or communicating in digital spaces. This is how we work and live. But what that means is that we have to pay more attention to our skills when it comes to conversation. Because like everything else, it's a skill that you use, and you can lose it if you don't use it enough. Now I'm willing to bet some of you might have noticed this, if you've been in the workforce for a while and you've noticed that, teams don't talk to each other as much. It's a lot, I don't know about you, but I'm a remote worker. I also work on Slack a lot. And, sometimes you get to a conversation where like, I can't have this conversation on Slack anymore. I actually have to call someone, right? Because we don't have the nuance, we don't have the tone. If you're working cross-discipline, so for example, I'm a non-technical person on an AI team, sometimes we're not even in the shared vocabulary. And we need a conversation, an actual, not face-to-face, but maybe over Zoom, to actually talk through issues, okay? And it takes work. But the tendency is to retreat to our digital environments because it's easier. In this book, one of the things that she found was students were nervous about having open-ended conversations because they couldn't script the conversation perfectly beforehand, right? Because we're used to how you write out that text or that Slack message and you're like, no, that's not it. Or maybe we just reply with, a GIF because, that's funny, right? We slay when it comes to emojis and that. When it comes to actual communication, it's a lot harder. Again, I think this is stuff we already know. Our flight from conversation undermines our relationships, creativity, and productivity. Same thing in that book. And the reason I advocate so hard for conversations is because you never know where one might lead. So I want you to think right now, like, what's the last conversation that you had, that you loved, that you walked away and you're like, oh, that felt nice, that felt good. Does anyone have one in mind? Shake your head if you're like, yeah, I can remember one. Okay. Now think about it. What about that conversation stood out? What did you like about that conversation? Anyone want to share? You don't have to give details, but what did you like about it? How did it make you feel? Connected? I heard? Yeah? Anything else? Heard? Excellent. Excellent. That's the value. Whether you're doing it in your personal life, whether you're doing it here in the conference, whether you're doing it in the workplace, right? There's also opportunities, that come out of these. It's funny, networking has really taught us, like, you've got to talk to people, so you've got to get that job, right? Well, there's two problems with that. Well, there's actually more than one problem, more than two. Main problems with that: one, someone might not have a job. Two, you might not be a job seeker. So then what's the point, right? And three, like, there's so much more to talking to people than just getting jobs in a professional environment. Could be collaboration, could be someone that's doing a really cool job that maybe in the future you want. You just never know. Great example of never knowing where conversations might lead. About 15 years ago, I had graduated my undergrad and was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm just kind of messing around. I'd been traveling a lot. I was a liberal arts and language major. And I had met someone, like in a hostel in Greece. And a couple years later, she came through my town in Eugene, Oregon. I was like, what? She's Australian. I was like, what are you doing here? I was like, oh, I'm working for this company that sells adventure travel. I was like, well, that's cool. And she goes, well, if you like it, I can hook you up because they're looking for Americans to go to New Zealand and sell adventure travel down there. And you just get to travel New Zealand and go into all the universities. And I said, holy shit, sign me up. I'm ready. She's like, well, all you got to do is a bunch of public presentations. And I was like, done. I got a job selling adventure travel just because I met with my friend and had a conversation. And, I hear, because I've been a professional career coach, I have heard stories like this over and over and over again. The other day, I just got an email from someone that I met 2 years ago at a conference who we just had a conversation about living abroad. And I had kept in touch, and he sent me a job the other day. I'm not looking for a job. But he sent me a job the other day in Spain. He says, hey, are you interested in this? I think you might be a good fit. I was like, if I were in a different life, yes. Right? And so maybe it's not about job seeking. Maybe it's about, finding common interests, right? I have met friends that have good, we've bonded over books. We've bonded over, our mutual hatred for meetings, right? Like, there's all kinds of things that you can meet people for, and that's the value of a conversation. So let's break it down. Let's get to the actual part with, I told you now, why we're doing all this. But let's talk about how we actually do it. Curious conversations are about intention. Intention means openness. It's also about skill sets, right? We're talking active listening, storytelling, seeking commonality, asking questions, and avoiding assumptions. And I think that last one is super important too, right? When you're in a new group and stuff, it's really easy to be like, well, that person's probably like this. Give them a time, give them a chance. I say this knowing that not all conversations are good, by the way. Like, I'm not like a person who's like, oh, conversations are valuable. They're not. But you have to give it a chance first. That's what really makes something a conversational, curious conversation, is avoiding assumptions, active listening. And this really comes into play once you're working, either across cultures, if you're working across functions in the workplace, and so on. So let's talk about the conversation with strangers piece, because that's really what we're going to be doing at this conference, right? Conversations with strangers. I work on the conversational sandwich. We've got the intro, small talk and storytelling, flow, what we call the unknown bits, and questions, and exit is your exit sentence. And these are all the pieces that make a conversation, that make it real easy for you as you go into approaching a conference. Is anyone here not from the US? Yeah, you're not from the US? Okay. So in a previous job, I used to work a lot with international students coming to the US. And one of the challenges was this small talk piece. And they would say things like, I hate small talk. And I say, well, yes, Americans hate it too, right? Because we're not really, it's like you're not talking about anything. And the real reason behind small talk is to establish a surface level commonality. And generally speaking, we're just gonna talk about three things. The 3 W's: weekend, work, weather. And once we get beyond that, then we can start the conversation. You don't always have to start with this, but give it space, right? Storytelling. This is that piece that commonly we ask, what do you do? Right? Well, I can tell people I'm a conversation designer. Or I can tell them a story. I work remotely for a San Francisco startup and help AI teams improve their chatbot experience for users. Bit different, right? Think about your work right now. If you think about what you do, could you tell a story about it? I'm gonna ask you to do it later. Spoiler alert. And what that does is when you give a story like that, when you reframe what you do into a story, you help people ask questions about you. You put it out there, and you help people be curious about you. So you're almost doing a favor for the people that are in your conversation. Flow, also the part. What the F do I talk about? This is where I get a lot of questions like, but what am I supposed to say in that part? And here's the point. You have a couple of options. One, you can share your interests and curiosities. Think back to what I asked you before. What are you looking for in this conference? What are you interested in learning about? Example, I am super interested in learning how people with non-technical backgrounds partner with machine learning teams and their value. I'm super interested in learning that. So that's something I would probably say to someone. What brought you to this conference? Well, I'm really interested in learning how non-technical people partner with machine learning engineers. Think about yours. What are you interested in? How would you tell that to someone in a conversation? And what you're doing is you're just putting out there, like, you don't have to talk the whole time. You've just given that to somebody else and said, here's what I'm looking for. And they can decide what to do with it. Stay open to the conversation. That's that ambiguity part. You're not sure where it could fizzle. They could be like, yeah, I don't know anyone about that, but I gotta go. And they leave. Well, that's how the conversation goes. That's it, right? You're done. You're done here. Okay? And that's okay. Or the person might turn around and say, oh my gosh, let me tell you about this project I worked on. And all of a sudden they're talking, and all you gotta do is listen. Right? And then you're getting what you need. Listen without thinking to say next. This can be very difficult, but especially if you're a non-native speaker. Again, I used to work with a lot of international people. But really focus on what is the person giving you, not what you want to say. Because within what they're giving you are nuggets that you can grab onto and use to ask questions, to follow up, to tell your own stories. Much like I went back to the story in the beginning, right? When you tell your story, you're giving them something to work with. Ask curious questions. We'll go on to that. Use emergency sentences. Make eye contact. Stay off your phone. Stay off your phone. I'll tell you this. The amount of times where I'm in a conversation and someone's like this, and that's not active listening. And the biggest thing that you can give people in a conversational setting is attention. And since attention is so hard to keep these days, it's incredibly valuable. The fact that I will spend time with you, talking to you, and you with me for 5 minutes, like, that's valuable, right? So spend your time wisely, make sure you give the full attention. And eye contact is obviously important. I don't know if you guys have ever been in that situation where someone's, you're talking to someone and they're kind of looking around as you talk to you, right? That doesn't feel good. So just giving that alone is being a very good participant in the conversation. You'd be surprised how far that goes. Let's break down those curious questions. If I gave you this, what would you ask me if we were in a conversation?
What's your story?
What's that?
What's your story?
Why is my story this way?
No, like just if I were to ask you a question, like what is your story?
Oh yeah, so you asked me, what's my story? That's a good question to ask. Yeah. What else would you ask?
How do you step into their world?
Oh, that's a great question. How do I step into their world? Yeah, I got a lot I could tell you about that, right? What else could you ask me about that? If someone gave you this, what would you ask them?
So I actually work remotely as well, so I will be asking you this later.
Yeah.
What's it like to work remotely?
Brilliant, okay, fabulous, I love this. So she had said, what's it like to work remotely? She also works remotely too. And I'll tell you, this is a fun one. I got into a conversation with someone else real recently because they worked remote. And I had joked, I was like, look at me, I got dressed up for the day. And he's like, oh, I get dressed up every day to go to my remote job just in my living room. And we had a whole conversation about why do you get dressed up, right? And it was actually a really fun conversation to have, and I didn't know this person at all. So, you know, again, these are nuggets that you can just grab onto. And I tell you what, you find that extrovert in a group and you ask them a question, they'll go, right? I could talk for a long time about any of these subjects, right? So your question is on there, how do you improve the chatbot? What do your users think of the chatbot? What's your job like on a daily basis? It's easy for me to ask questions about my job, obviously. But you get an idea here of how to really form these curious questions. Because when it comes down to it, people like to talk about themselves. So if you can get them talking about themselves, you've won. This isn't a game, obviously, but you know, this is part of the secret of if you're approaching a conversation and you're not sure what to say, curious conversations help. Now, I would advise not just asking rapid fire questions, that's an odd flow, but use them, right? Use them as you explore this person's experience. Here's a whole bunch of them. You can take a picture of this, you can write some of them down, like use them this week if you're like not sure what to say. Because they're incredibly valuable and they help the conversation move forward. Emergency sentence. These are the things that you just have in the back pocket when you're just like, oh shit, I've got nothing to say. I learned one of these when I was a coach. I didn't know that. Tell me more. Right? That's a great one. And people are like, oh, you need to know. Great, let me tell you more. It's gonna be really interesting if you guys are out there doing this to each other, right? You know the secrets. I'd love to hear more about your experience with that. And that's a genuine thing, right? If someone's telling them something really interesting, you might tell them. Side note, I teach international students, and one of them said, what does it mean when an American says interesting? And that's a loaded question, because if someone just goes, interesting, you don't really know what they mean in a conversation, right? They could mean, I think that's really boring, or they could mean, I have nothing left to say, right? Interesting is a hard word in a conversation. But tell them if you're interested. That's cool. I'd love to hear more about your experience. Don't be afraid to be enthusiastic about what someone's telling you. Because in an environment like this, when we come together and we're sharing and we're learning, people are gonna be stoked. So use that to your advantage. I've had a similar experience. Share your story. Great time to practice your storytelling. Totally unrelated, but that reminds me, that's for your non sequiturs. Right? If you've got something you want to say, and you're like, no, I do want to tell this story. Great, throw it in with a totally unrelated here, but that reminds me. And then you can get away with it. Okay. I like having these in my back pocket because you just never know where a conversation might take you. And it's a fail-safe, right? Exit sentences are critical. How many of you guys have been trapped in a conversation before? Yeah, it's pretty common. I have too. Like, I'm pretty sure I might have trapped people in conversations, I'll be honest. You know, but the fact is all you need is an exit sentence. And this is a sentence that's your go-to sentence that helps you get out. And they're simple. Thank you for chatting with me today. Let's stay connected. Great to meet you. I'm gonna check a few work emails before the next session. Hope to see you later. Look at that one. That one is so nice, especially here if we're working during the workday and stuff like that. That's a beautiful one, right? I made a huge mistake and so desperate to get out of conversation where it's like, I gotta go over there. That's a terrible thing to say, right? You know, so have your exit sentence so you don't panic and just be like, bye, right? It helps. If you do anything. If you liked the person, tell them. You can say, great to meet you. Introduce yourself again, because generally we forget names, so you're doing them a favor. And then wait and walk. Wait and walk is wait for their response, and then walk away, right? And I tell you, these exit sentences are money. They are so useful when it comes to it, because what a lot of times I find is when I talk to people about their conversation style and stuff like that, they're just, we're not sure what to say, we're not sure how to start a conversation or what to say, and then you don't know what to do once they're in it. And you do have some control, right? So you can control this where you can get out of the conversation, and that's where your exit sentence comes in. So now we have the networking break. Let's talk about strategies for your networking break. 3 low-key approaches to the networking break. I have told you that, approaching conversations and networking and to have an openness, right? But for some, openness is still just not enough. So I want to give you a couple of frameworks and ways that you can approach it. First, before we do this, I want to just say if you're ever looking for a group to talk to and you're not sure, look for two people that are standing together. This was actually a tip someone else gave to me. And I said, look for two people that are standing together because either they know each other and they know they should be talking to other people, or they don't know each other and a third would be really welcome. Right? And you can tell by their body language. If they're facing each other like this, look at their feet. If their feet are pointed to each other like this, they might be in you know, conversation that's going to be harder to get into. But if they're facing outward like this and kind of casually talking to each other, that signals their openness to a third coming in or another couple. So look for that if you're looking for cues to approach a conversation. If you're going to approach a conversation and you know you're feeling nervous, I want you to embrace awkward. Okay, this is a phrase I work with all the time. I embracing awkward. The other day, I wanted so bad to talk to this speaker. I stood there for about 5 minutes waiting for her to finish a conversation right there. And she opened it up, but she was still talking to her. Now, was that awkward on my part? Absolutely. But I really wanted to talk to her. And I did. You know, she had an incredible talk and she gave me some great perspective and, you know, it was important that I talked to her. And so I was willing to stand there for 5 minutes of pure awkwardness, wondering if I looked like a lunatic because I wanted that. And I was polite, you know, I didn't try to interrupt. I was quiet, I wasn't on my phone, things like that. So embrace that awkwardness. And that's going to get you at least started. And when you join a conversation, it's super simple. Hi, I'm Nicole. How's it going? And then see what people say, right? You can follow up with a curious question. It just depends. So here's some approaches. Gamify it. I've done this, you know, I've been in so many different environments where I'm like, I don't know these people. I got nothing, right? So it's like, okay, so who can I find that has a background like mine? So for example, I used to write, I was a luxury travel writer for one point. I've had a lot of different careers. And so I've gone to places where I was like, you know, I want to see who else has been a travel writer? Who else has been to this country? Right? Things like that. Make it about yourself and make it a game. See if I can find these people. Because all of you don't just have, you know, machine learning or interest in machine learning in common. You have other things, right? And the beauty is trying to find those other things in people because you never know. So pick something and just approach it like that. Be like, wonder if I can find someone that has this, and start playing with it, right? That gives you the control. Experiment. What if I just say this the whole time? What if I decide that in every conversation I'm going to challenge someone to paper, rock, scissors? I don't know. Or they'd be like, hey, I'm Nicole.
Kyle?
Do you mind if we play a quick game of paper, rock, scissors?
Let's do it.
All right. Is it 1, 2, 3, shoot?
Yeah.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, shoot. Damn, let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, shoot. Damn. 1, 2, 3, shoot. What? 1, 2, 3, shoot. No! Thank you for playing along. And you guys could do that. There is no reason why you can't do that. That's kind of my point. Is it kind of weird? Yeah, but so what? Right? It's kind of interesting. And I don't know what yours will be. You can use that if you want to use this to go color, paper, rock, scissors. That's great too. The point being is you can make it what you want. So if you want to experiment, that's fine. You know, I can tell you what, I play a lot with storytelling. How do I tell my story? Because I have a business, I do a lot of speaking, I have a contract job. So I have these multiple identities, and a lot of us have that in our careers, right? Where we go through times where you're like, I'm not sure quite what I'm doing, especially if you're in a career transition. And so it can be hard when someone says, what do you do? And you're like, I don't know. I do a lot of things. So back when I first started, I was at a party, and someone had said, oh, I heard you're quitting your job and, you know, gonna go start your own business. What are you gonna do? And I was like, I'm preparing people for the 4th Industrial Revolution. And it bombed. He was like, okay, gonna go. Talk to the wrong person now, right? Because that's hella awkward. That's terrible. Don't say that. But what I was doing was I was experimenting. I was experimenting badly with how I told my story. And yeah, was it painful when that happened? Yes, it was super awkward. And I don't actually get that embarrassed, but that time I was. And I was experimenting with my story. And so that's what I mean by experimenting. You have the option of trying different things. The last one, set a limit. This goes back to that idea of networking. You're really told you gotta get in there, talk to everyone, you gotta get in and work the room. Don't do that if you don't wanna do it. That's terrible. That's that quantity over quality mentality. I want you to focus on quality. Set a limit. Say, okay, this is a networking break. I'm gonna try to have 2 quality conversations. You define what quality means to you. Quality might mean, I did it, right? Or it might mean, I met somebody that's working in a field that I really enjoy. You get to define that. So set your limits. It's another good way. It takes the pressure off when you're in a big group. The other thing, when all else fails, ride some coattails. Find your extroverts. This is what my friend always says. She says, yeah, we just ride your coattails if we're at an event, because you'll just find people to talk to and we'll stand next to you. And I thought, okay, well, that's useful if I can be of help, right? And when I do this in big groups and stuff, it's always mixed with extroverts and introverts and stuff like that. And that's my advice, because if there are any extroverts in here, your role is to invite people in. As an extrovert, your role is to see the person who's kind of standing there unsure and be like, hey, how's it going? Right? And introduce them and welcome them into the circle. Okay? So, find that person that's talking a lot. Go hang out next to them, see what's happening in their conversation. Or find a friend that's like that and follow them around the conference. Also an option. Okay? This is how extroverts and introverts work together, and it's a beautiful thing when it happens. So I want to pause there. Are there questions at this point? Now that I've talked a lot about conversations. Questions, thoughts?
I just am wondering how long a networking break is going to be so I can calibrate my time.
Yeah, that's a great point. So she asked, how long is the networking break going to be? I actually don't know in this case, so I didn't look. But I think that raises a good point, right? Like looking ahead to see how long is this networking break, right? And then working with like, how long do I want to actually be in this break, you know? Or sometimes a conversation's so good that maybe you're like, I'm just going to have 2 conversations, but one's so good that you don't leave it. We have a saying in my friend group, don't leave fun to find fun, right? It's like that's how you fight FOMO. Because, you know, everyone's like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing this. No, if you're having a good time right here and you're enjoying that person, stay with it, right? Again, you get to decide that. Yeah.
My thought was just that if you came up to me and said that you were working on preparing people for the 4th Industrial Revolution, I would be all about it, and I just wanted to say that.
So I would find my audience if I told you that. Yeah, that's good to know. I've fixed my story since then, but wouldn't that have been nice had I met you at that time and said that, you know, and then we could have had a conversation about it, and I'm sure it would have been really cool.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Industry 4.0.
Yeah, okay, so it sounds like we can talk about that at any point. I love that. And see, this right here, this is what I love when this happens. So many times, you know, we worry about what we're going to say, but like, we got to just put it out there and see what happens. We do, in a longer version of these workshops, we've done things where we come up and pitch. What do you want to learn from people, right? And it helps draw people to you, but you can do that with each other. And you can say things like, I came to this conference so I could learn this. I came to this conference because I'm curious about this. These are incredibly powerful statements. And you just never know. Someone might have something that they'll add to it. When I do a lot of workshops on job seeking, you know, job seekers tend to hold in there's a lot of shame around job seeking and secrecy. And the problem with that is that it prevents people from sharing what they're looking for. Because people can't help you if they don't know. And all it takes is a sentence. I'm looking for a job, you know, in machine learning. I'm looking for a job in an AI startup. I'm just looking to explore what machine learning even is, right? These are powerful sentences that you can give people. You don't have to be an expert to talk in a conversation. In fact, that authenticity and vulnerability is really what makes a conversation. We go back to, you know, when we talked about what makes a good conversation, if you think about your last conversation, someone had said being heard. That's valuable. You know, if someone gives you space to talk about, you know, what you're looking for and what you're curious about, that's valuable to you. And I'm sure to the other person, because people feel good if they can help you, right? If they can say, okay, here's what you need to do, right? Here's some things that work for me. They feel good about helping. So that's the power of being able to put yourself out there. Yeah.
So you talked quite a bit about introverts versus extroverts and people who are native English speakers from the US and those who aren't. And I'm wondering if you, in your experience as a career counselor, it sounds like to some degree, can can talk about any differences you've observed between the way that men and women converse in professional settings.
Sure, so the ways that men and women tend to approach it. I can say that this goes back to kind of differences, gender differences in how we're socialized, right? Women are much more socialized in the idea that we gotta what we put out there has to be perfect and has to be right. And I think sometimes we can wait to have the right thing to say, whereas I found that the men tend to just say things without worrying so much about what it sounds like and how perfect it might be. Also social cues, men tend to talk more in group environments. And so we tend to, a lot of times, and again, it's hard for me to generalize here, but there are times where women tend to defer and wait. So a lot of times I'll notice, even when I'm asking for questions, it's like most of the time men raise their hands first and then women will go next. And so I see some of those differences in conversational dynamics. At the same time, man, there's just differences like in any group, right? Those would be it's hard to generalize, but those would be some of the bigger ones I see. Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say, like, you know, if you're like, well, that sucks, like, then just speak up and see what happens, right? Like, you know, and making space for everybody's voice is important too. I think about this just as, you know, a woman, and like, you know, we've got all different kinds of people around, and like, how do you make sure you're not taking up all of the space? I think of that as an extrovert, right? Like, don't dominate a conversation. And so I think those are good conversational skills to learn as well. Coming from the extrovert side, don't dominate a conversation, and some of that's gendered, and some of it's just personality. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to think about, I want to go back to that storytelling piece. And I want you to think about your story right now. Who are you? If I asked you, what do you do? What would you say? Okay? I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and I want you to like write a sentence down, or a sentence or 2 sentences, because we're going to use it in a second here. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and it's going to get awkwardly silent on my part. But for you guys, take a couple minutes and think about that story. I'm going to put the example back up from before. There we are. So what do you do? And I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Okay. Brilliant. So, done some reflection, thinking about what we want out of this conference. Now, here's what we're going to do. This is the part where we're actually going to talk to one another. So, obviously, this is a workshop. But I want you to think about this differently. We're not doing a networking break here. I want you to think about, I've given you tools, I've given you ways to talk about yourself, I've given you direction in terms of sharing, you know, what do you want to learn, who do you want to meet, and I'm going to put up some of the questions here. Back. There we are. Nope, that's not it. That's not it. There we are. Okay, all the questions. This is your cheat sheet. So if you get stuck in any conversation here where you're like, I don't know what to say, turn around and use one of these. Now the reason we're doing this is partly because I want to give you space to try things out. You all have been through the same workshop right now. So you can say and do whatever you want, because we all know we're experimenting right now, right? I want to give you space to do that. And I want to remind you too to embrace awkward, because it is going to get awkward to talk to strangers. When people come together, it's bumbling and it's weird, right? I mess up on a regular basis, and I'm an extrovert who teaches this, right? But that's because I'm putting myself out there. And there's all kinds of people, which is what makes this so awkward at times. So what I want is to just see what you guys learn from talking to one another, right? This is no pressure. This is, you're not trying to make connections. You are simply just trying to get to know one another. And what's really nice about this is you'll know someone, at least from this conference, as you go through the rest of the conference, for those of you that might not know somebody here. So we're going to take about 5 minutes to do this, and we're going to have some open-ended conversations. And if you feel like you want to try the exit move, try to exit and go talk to somebody else. This is a free to talk zone. We're experimenting with conversations. Please talk to people that you haven't already talked to or partnered up with, because obviously, right? Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Let's do it. That means you got to get up too and go see each other, introduce yourselves. Freedom.
Oh, thank you.
Go interrupt the other conference. I don't know.
I don't think I'm going to be here too long.
So one of the hard parts about when you do this workshop is getting people to stop conversations, because I love hearing it. We're gonna wrap this, whoa, one second. We're gonna wrangle this back together here. Tell you this is a lot easier to do with a group like this. Sometimes I have to do this with a group of 400 people to wrangle those conversations, and it's a lot harder. So let's talk about what just happened. All right. Let's talk about that. Okay, we're back. All right, so let's talk about what just happened. What's that?
I don't want to interrupt, but we just got coffee in. If anybody wants coffee, it might be a good time to take a break in your talk.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after this coffee.
And there's donuts in there as well, vegan and regular. Oh, look, and it's me. As a dog. I love that.
Okay.
Pissed off dog.
Do you need a quick coffee break? Go get coffee and donuts, come back, and we'll debrief. Nice. Okay. Cool, so we've had some exchanges. You want to talk about non-work related stuff? Find commonality?
Coffee.
Coffee, okay, that's a legit. That goes back sometimes to small talk too, right? But then in the Pacific Northwest, you can go deep on coffee. So it gets a little bit more than just small talk, right? Real deep on coffee. Anyone else learn something like maybe that was helpful or get a recommendation? Did anyone use any questions? Yeah.
Recommendations on working with recruiters.
That's right. You got some good advice on working with recruiters. That was really good. We talked about career transitions and stuff like that. You just feel like you can do this for the event? I see some shaking heads, yes? Yeah? Some strategies? Okay. Let's talk about this. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about helping people have better conversations is the simple fact that when it comes to being in the workspace and working on machine learning and specifically cutting edge tech, we need to be talking to one another. And not just in our own departments, but in other departments, and understanding the different perspectives. Because the benefits of curiosity in the workplace are outstanding. This comes from the Harvard Business Review article that I talked about earlier, but fewer decision-making areas, less likely to fall into confirmation bias, so that idea where you're just, confirming what you already know, right? Curiosity is really the antidote to assumption, right? Less stereotyping of people. My background actually is in international education, so I've lived abroad and worked with a lot of internationals who have come to the US, and one of the things you have to really work on in the beginning is breaking down those assumptions about people, right? And you have to go into it with openness, especially if you're living in a foreign country, and say, I have no idea what's going on here, right? And you have to be curious. Why are people saying this? What do they mean? Why is it like this? And you have to ask questions and observe. That curiosity helps break down stereotypes, and that's really important when you're building models and products for that are going to impact people and impact their lives. More creativity in non-creative jobs. I told you before, my professional background, I like to tell people I'm a professional job hopper. I have worked I've worked in, done business development in startups. I worked as a private jet travel writer for a while. I've been a study abroad advisor. I've been a professional career coach at Yale. I've had all of these different experiences. And what's really interesting is that when I was a travel writer, I was in an incredibly creative position. And so every day we would get together with the designers and the digital designers and the writers and the editors, and we'd hash things out and make these beautiful digital experiences for our users. And I love those moments because you could just say something and they'd be like, oh, maybe we do it this way, or maybe we do it this way. And we come up with these products and digital products that were really cool. And then I went back into higher ed. And all that conversation with curiosity and creativity really just went down the drain. And part of that was because I worked in a system that, in the Ivy League system, and there's a tendency in Ivy Leagues to only look at what other Ivy League schools are doing. And that was really hard for me because it's like, we all know ideas come from different places, right? Just because you're Ivy League doesn't mean you have the best ideas, you just have the most money. And so it was really hard for me to go back into that environment where it was like, there wasn't a lot of creativity and, quite honestly, not a lot of curiosity about what other schools were doing and what other things we're doing. And I see that this is not just the Ivy Leagues or higher ed, this is across the board common in organizations, right? We get real siloed, leaders in particular tend to get real siloed and focused on their department, right? A lot of times because it's obviously tied to their metrics and their pay sometimes. But imperative to embrace curiosity in the workspace so we can avoid making assumptions, and we can build better products, right? And we can seek out ideas that aren't just in front of us or in our department. So I talk about this, well, this is a good quote too. Exploration often involves questioning the status quo and doesn't always produce useful information. That's important. Because when we think about conversations, you've probably had conversations where you're like, nah, that really wasn't quite what I needed. That's okay. It's the act of exploring, the fact that you put yourself out there to do it. That's what matters. Because you can't predict when you're gonna have a good conversation and when you're not, right? But it is also means not settling for the first possible solution, and so often it yields better remedies. And this is what I think is incredibly important, because when we're working in this tech space, everything is a sprint, everything is as fast as possible. You're working in the AI space, especially machine learning, there's a lot of pressure to produce, to get, to get things right. There's a lot of money involved in a lot of these places. And so, sometimes curiosity and exploration can be seen as a hindrance. And I want to get you out of that mindset, because you never know where it might lead, and there are problems with making assumptions. I don't know how many of you know about Predictum. They were in the news. They were a babysitter app a babysitter platform that ranked babysitters and assigned them a risk score based on their publicly available social media data. And they used machine learning, neural language processing for text, and computer vision for images. You can see their tech down here. They used that, they graded them on a scale of 1 to 5. The babysitters were categorized into 4 categories: bullying, harassment, disrespectful attitude, explicit content, and drug use. So they would give you a platform that showed parents what their maybe potential babysitter would be like. So that way, effectively, parents could screen and get the best babysitter possible. So. This is the CEO, this is from a Gizmodo article that tested this out on his own babysitter, and he said, Predictum doesn't look at words specifically or phrases, we look at context. We call it vectorizing the words in the post into a vector that represents their context. Then we have what's called a convolution neural net, which handles classification. So we can say, is this post aggressive? Is it abusive? Is it polite? Is it positive? Is it negative? And then based on those outputs, we then have several other models on top of it, which provide the risk levels, and that provide the explainability. So that's how he describes what their model does. This journalist tested it on his own babysitter here, and then on, I think it was his son's godfather or something like that. And you can see, I'm summarizing a very long investigative article, by the way. What they found was Kiana was a low risk looks good, but she scores a 3 on disrespectful attitude. And over here, this was a professional comic. He had a Twitter feed full of vulgarities. I read through them. I'm not putting them on here, but they were substantial. And he was ranked as a very low risk. And so then we can see here that Kiana is a woman of color. There are issues with putting labels around disrespectful attitudes around women of color, and so on. And so really what happened is they got accused of being a racist app. Now, of course, the owner or the founder said, we are not racist. Well, that doesn't matter. Your app came out racist. And this blew up. It went viral. And you can see some of the feedback on this predictive model here, this technology. A lot of pushback. This was the founder of Basecamp. Predictive's black box algorithm analyzes babysitters' social media accounts, reducing them to a single fit score. Beyond disgusting, downright evil. Social media algorithms ask you to be the worst fake you can be. Higher in algorithms reject you for it. And I thought this was super interesting to read through and kind of see this backlash, because again, the user or the founder said, no, this isn't a racist platform here. We're taking publicly available data, and that doesn't matter, because the outcome was, it doesn't matter what your intent was, the outcome was racist. And so, they talk about, well, we didn't design it to be biased. Well, yeah, of course you did, right? But bias creeps in all kinds of ways. And when I read something like this, I think, wow, you guys must not be very curious. Because I found this with a quick Google search. Even those of you with the best of this is on, by the way, this is about identity and the way that you present yourself on social media. We were taught from a very young age when we first started using social to be authentic, and then we learned we can't really be authentic, and then sometimes we learned that we can be authentic on one platform but not the other, and sometimes we made the mistake of being too authentic under our real names and then later built fake profiles. right? We have all these different identities online because most of us have been living online for 10 years or so. And this, it says, even those of you with the best of intentions, eager to keep your avatars as authentic as possible, can't always or ever present the full spectrum of who you are in any given context. We're just too complex and dynamic for that. So instead, we opt for presenting the most effective version of ourselves, which may differ from platform to platform and moment to moment. Now, this is from a PhD that wrote in Psychology Today. It was one of the first Google results. And I point that out because I was curious. I was like, why did they just make the assumption that what babysitters put out online was exactly who they are, right? What about jokes? What about teenagers who constantly are, using these tools in very different ways than professionals? Does that actually reflect them? Does it reflect their peers? A lot of questions around that. And so when I see what happened, I think, my God, you had no curiosity there. You made some serious assumptions, and this is what happened. They had huge backlash. They had to put a pause on it. Company has been overwhelmed by feedback. I would say that's an understatement. And would indefinitely postpone its full launch while its executives focus on evaluating how we offer our service and making changes to address some of the suggestions we received. Now, I read through some of that, and they had said, look, we talked to the moms, we talked to parents, this is what they wanted. But did they talk to their users? Did they talk to the babysitters whose lives they were evaluating? Did they sit with a teenager and say, what are you putting out there online? What are your friends putting out there? Did they ask them how they feel? I don't know. But these are the questions I have. Because I work in a space where I regularly look at the users and how users react, right? The thing about when you're building models and things like that, you're making tons of assumptions with the data, with how you frame the problem. And it's okay to make assumptions, but you need to think through those assumptions. And that's where the curiosity comes in. And the challenge and the tension is that we work in organizations that may not embrace that curiosity. It may not be built into your design process. You might not have a design process. It may be just you and someone else, right? You're like, we gotta get this out. We just gotta test it. We gotta make it, right? And just because your model's accurate doesn't mean, you know what the impact is going to be on the user. So it's important to think about that because what the reality is that in your roles, a key challenge when it comes to the regulation of algorithmic decision-making systems, so I'm talking about anything that makes a decision has a big impact on your users, is that any evaluation of the bias, fairness of these systems must take into account the inherently socio-technical context of how a system is intended to be used. When used for impactful decisions, the norms that an algorithmic system must obey are not just statistical, but also legal, moral, and cultural. Now, I think you guys already know some of this. But I think it's important to point out this was a gathering at the Human AI and T workshop in Barcelona. This is really recent, where they were trying to figure out the impact of machine learning. This is what stood out for me. We must obey not just the norms are not just statistical, but also legal, moral, and culture. Translated, that means the role of machine learning engineer is interdisciplinary. Now you might be thinking, like, how do I even fit this into my day, right? Especially if you're transitioning into this. And that's real hard because already a machine learning, engineer is, bridging worlds between data scientists and software engineers and really is already a mashup of roles. And so it starts with being able to, there's this quote. The way in which computer scientists are taught to frame problems isn't compatible with the best way to think about social problems. So within computer science, it's considered good practice to design a system that can be used for different tasks in different contexts. But what that does is ignore a lot of social context. You can't have designed a system in Utah and then applied it directly in Kentucky, because different communities have different versions of fairness. Or you can't have a system that you apply for fair criminal justice results and then apply to employment. How we think about fairness in these contexts is totally different. Now, we're obviously not going to have a conversation about fairness right now because that is, everybody's trying to unpack that and understand that and discuss that. But that's the point, is that we have to be having these discussions. And those discussions, you have to be able to ask the right questions. You have to be able to put yourself out there and find other people to discuss this with. And that's where it goes back to that core skill of conversational skills, because this doesn't take place in Slack. It takes place from people outside of your department. It takes place with people who are your users. It takes place with experts. So thinking through your work, as you think through these things, who can provide a different perspective from your group? A lot of times engineering teams are quite homogenous. right? I've heard things from a machine learning engineer. I remember this one guy said something to me. He was talking about radiologists, and he said, oh, there'll be no more radiologists because of technology. We're already there. I was like, okay, that's a common thing to say when we talk about the future of work and jobs. A radiologist comes up all the time. Well, we already have technology that can, pinpoint cancer better than any radiologist. We don't need them anymore. And that to me is lazy thinking, right? Because there's a lot between radiologists now and the future, right? But it also shows me that you're not curious enough to understand what a radiologist does. How does a radiologist act? How do they interact with patients? How do they interact with doctors? What is their job actually like? Because if you're building a product for them, you need to know those things. Maybe not you specifically, but someone in your organization does, and if you're a small startup, you might not have the funding to be able to hire a UX designer or a researcher or any of those wonderful titles. So that means you on the engineering team or the data science team need to think that way. You need to be thinking about who are these people, what do they do, what are their lives like. You need context. A lot of times, I bridge a world between quantitative and qualitative. I'm very comfortable in the qualitative area. And one of the things I find myself explaining what I do is I explain the why. A lot of times your data, quantitative data, will explain what happened, but I can tell you why when I look at the qualitative data. Qualitative data comes from many sources. It could be the transcripts from your chatbot. It could be conversations with people. It could be in-depth interviews. These are valuable data points that you want to use as you build products. And it comes from the base skill of having conversations, right? Whose perspectives are missing? Who is not at the table? What assumptions have you made about those who will be most impacted by your product? The thing I love about this question, it forces you to think, who will be most impacted? Not who your users are. Because you may work on a product that has multiple users. Who are your users and how will they react to this product? That's another one. That's just forward thinking. We saw that with predictive. Did they think about how they might react? I don't know, but I'm willing to bet they made some assumptions, right? Curious conversations about fairness, bias, and impact can't happen in Slack. I just like to say that. I live in Slack. Slack is an incredible tool for getting work done. It's also a tool that minimizes our conversations. So, you have to fight that, essentially. You have to make the effort to get out, to talk. It is so much easier to Slack somebody, but you can't have those valuable conversations. And we don't even just have to talk about fairness. I'm talking about idea generation. I'm talking about the fact that, maybe I work in one department and you work in the other, and we've been working on different problems, and it turns out just a conversation between the two of us, we can solve this problem, right? That's the power of it, and we're in environments now that take that away from us because we're in digital environments, and that's not your fault, it's not our company's fault, it's just the way that we communicate now. So we just have to work that much harder to make sure we're having these curious conversations. Because as machine learning engineers or anyone or data scientists that are working on cutting edge products, you have the power right now to shape things, and that comes with a lot of responsibility. So, this is what I started off saying about my mission to get people to have better conversations, right? Impactful conversations, engaging conversations, talk to people at work, talk to people. It seems so simple, right? It's so easy to avoid. Ask the curious questions. If you're a person that does talk to people, maybe you have that chit chat, ask a curious question, throw something in there that goes beyond the surface level of the 3 W's in small talk. Collect new perspectives. This is how I describe what I do. I am collecting new perspectives. I love going to other countries or meeting new people from different backgrounds because I'm just curious. Who are you? What's your life like? Right? I used to work with international students and a lot with hiring in the US. And I love the things that they would tell me. They'd tell me things like, Nicole, in my country, if I smiled through an interview and asked questions, they'd think I looked dumb. I was like, yeah, what? No way. Because that's what you have to do in the US. You have to smile, show energy, And it's these perspectives that really interest me. I tell this story for when I do international student workshops. My first day, I went to school in Denmark for graduate school. And my first day there, they were like, introduce yourself. And I am an extrovert. And I was like, oh, and I'm an American. So I was like, hey, I'm Nicole. This is what I do. Blah, 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 blah. And this woman looks at me and she goes, wow, you are arrogant. And I was like, ouch, you have hurt my sensitive American heart, right? And what had happened there was a couple of different things, cultural things. One, as American, we are raised as special snowflakes who talk about ourselves all the time, right? And in other cultures, it is not as common to talk about yourself or put yourself above other people. You're not supposed to stand out. And there I was talking about how great I was, right? And the other thing that happened in that was that in Danish culture, they were a lot more direct in their feedback than Americans can be. Now that's depends on the culture. Everything is culturally dependent, right? But from my sensitive American heart, I was like, ooh, how could you say that to me? Right? And I thought that was so interesting. It's like, that was just a microcosm of what it was like when you cross cultures. But these are new perspectives that I hadn't had before. And you can do that in the workplace. You can do that if you're a career changer who's coming from one industry and going into another. You have all of these perspectives to learn and gain. And it's powerful because that's where new ideas come from and insights. Question all the assumptions. Why are we framing the problem this way? What are we leaving out? Question it. Escape the silos. Talk to people. Escape the silos. The work we're doing is interdisciplinary. Okay? I straddle two worlds, well, three. I straddle design, I straddle the AI team, and then I straddle I would say the user experience, which is kind of in design, but depends on how your company is structured. Okay? These are called hybrid roles. These are roles of the future where you're doing much more skills from different functions. These are the roles of the future. They're already here. You guys are getting into them if you're not already. Okay? And to do them well, you have to escape the silo. So, that's what it comes down to. Talk to people. I mean, literally, that's my entire talk. I could have saved you all that time and just been like, talk to people. But if you have questions, feel free to ask them to me. We are at the 11 o'clock hour. So, you guys are free to go. You can reach me through my website, which is futureskills.blog, and I will be here all weekend. So if you're like, I'm not sure about these conversations, come talk to me. I'll be your little professional coach, right? Professional conversation coach is what I meant to say. Yeah. Okay. Cool. You guys are all set. Feel good? You ready to have some conversations? You ready to talk to all the people? Yeah, I see some nodding heads. Yeah, it feels good. I also want to say congrats on getting through a workshop in a bar at 9:30 in the morning. This is probably one of the most unique places I have given a talk. It's been so dark. So, yeah. Any questions? You guys have thoughts on what I just put out there? Okay.
Will you have these slides available?
You know what? I'm not sure yet. Yeah. I could give you some of them. Yeah, I generally don't share the slides though. So, but I'm happy to chat with you about it. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You got it.